Well, there's a prolific criminal network operating online right now targeting children, primarily teenagers, but kids as young as 9 have been found to be involved with the group. It's called 764, and you've probably never heard of it. Now, this isn't just a group of online bullies or internet trolls. This is something far darker. It's a decentralized international cult that's part neo-Nazi ideology and satanic symbolism. And what they do is they befriend and gain kids' trust. They then slowly bait them into doing embarrassing, humiliating, and dangerous acts, things like sending nudes, cutting themselves, harming animals, harming siblings, various sex acts, even attempting to commit suicide. And once they get them to do something humiliating, they then use that to extort them into doing worse acts. Now, members of the group gain notoriety and status by doing increasingly bizarre, violent, and dangerous things and then posting them to their various group chats. Now, the group was founded in 2021 by Bradley Cadenhead, who at the time was a 15-year-old in Texas. He had dropped out of school, spent countless hours online. He made hundreds of fake accounts in various apps that your kids probably use every day, like Discord, Roblox, Telegram, Minecraft. He posted gory, violent, and sexual content. He spouted neo-Nazi and satanic ideologies. And he would entice people who liked his content to join his groups. And eventually, it grew. He then befriended and baited younger teenagers into sending sexual content. He then used that sexual content to extort them into things like carving his name into their bodies or harming their pets or sexually abusing their siblings. He then trained others on how to extort kids to the point where the group grew to the thousands. And when the kids would post increasingly violent or sexual content, the group egged it on by cheering and giving more notoriety and status to those who went further and further. In one case, a man plotted to kill a 14-year-old girl and filmed it, thinking that it would elevate his status with the group. He didn't end up going through with it. He was caught in advance, but that was his plan. So this gives you an idea of how dangerous this group is. Now, Bradley is now serving 80 years in prison, but because the group isn't really organized, but instead is more of an ideology, the group persists and has grown. In fact, FBI Director Kash Patel has announced that every single FBI office in the country has open and active 764 cases, and he's warned parents to be aware of this group in particular. Here's the tweet that he actually put out yesterday saying, "I'd encourage everyone to read this story on the Violent 764 network and how the FBI is working with local law enforcement to fight back. It's deeply disturbing, but critically important to understand what's out there and be aware of the threat American kids and families are facing every day. The criminals in these networks use online platforms to target vulnerable kids, coerce victims, and recruit others, often resulting in horrible cases of abuse. It is absolutely tragic, and I want people to know we're cracking down hard. Remember, last week we announced our agents and partners arrested 2 alleged leaders within 764. We've opened hundreds of cases around the country, and our field offices are fully engaged. This is a priority for myself, FBI Director Dan Bongino, Deputy Director Dan Bongino, and our leadership team. Those who come after America's children will face justice. We will be relentless in pursuing them. We hope to have more updates very soon. Thank you to our teams and partners who are treating this issue with the gravity it deserves and working around the clock to protect children." He then links to an ABC News article. Now, arrests have already been made in the U.S., Greece, and elsewhere, but there's a lot more to do, and every kid who is online is at risk. Once they get them to do one humiliating thing, they can use that to get your kid to do a lot more. And again, 764 members, they seek out vulnerable kids, they groom them, they trap them, they threaten, extort, and blackmail. Children are pushed into doing horrific things to themselves and to others while strangers watch, cheer, and trade the footage like currency. Now, the group creates what they call lore books, which are digital collections of abuse, and they pass them around like trophies. Well, our guest tonight, Becca Spinks, has spent years investigating 764. And because of her investigations, she's been the target of 764 and has had to go to great lengths to protect herself and her family from these dangerous people. Becca's done more to expose this group than anyone else and has been calling so much attention to it. The FBI is now finally paying attention. In fact, Pam Bondi earlier today announced the arrest of hundreds of predators, many of whom were part of this organization. Watch this.
Already, today we are proud to announce the results of the FBI's Operation Restore Justice initiative. This historic, unprecedented nationwide operation led to the arrest of 205 child sex predators. Unbelievable. in just 5 days. This was an incredible operation done in conjunction with the FBI and our prosecutors. Children and their families now have a chance to heal. These are online predators. Think about this. 115 victims, children. In 5 days, we were able to help. This kind of work takes a toll on the FBI agents and the prosecutors who are doing this every single day. They are working tirelessly online, dealing with the dregs of our society, the worst of the worst, the people that hide behind a computer and target our young children every single day. Our law enforcement, our prosecutors sit there and deal with this every day to get these monsters off the street. Director Patel and I, almost daily in our meetings, talk about these cases and what it does to our officers and our prosecutors, but also how many lives are being saved and how many children are being helped by this. Director Patel is going to get into the specific cases with you in a minute, but what I will tell you is these depraved human beings, if convicted, will face the maximum penalty in prison, some life. We will find you, we will arrest you, and we will charge you. If you are online targeting a child, you will not escape us. The FBI and the Department of Justice will come after you, and we will prosecute you. Parents, you have to know, this is so serious. Your child has no right to privacy on the internet. None. You have to monitor what your kids are doing, whether they're playing games on the internet, on social media, any other websites that children, teenagers frequent, an online predator can find them. I always say it's from instant message to instant nightmare. Parents, they're talking to your kids like they're other children, and they're not. They're predators. They pose as children. They get them sometimes to post explicit pictures of themselves after they talk to them. And then in some cases, they even try to blackmail the children. The suicide rate among teens ages 14 to 17 has increased as a result of this as well, because teens are taken advantage of and they're manipulated online by child predators. So all of you being here today and covering this is so important, because parents need to know. You've got to talk to your kids. They think they're talking to other children, but most of the time they're not.
Yeah, joining us now is Becca Spinks. Becca is a competitive shooter, self-defense trainer, and private investigator. She's here now to tell us how 764 works, what she's seen, and what parents absolutely need to know to protect their kids. Becca, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm terrified to have this conversation because this organization is frightening. What it's doing to the kids is frightening. Tell us, how did you get started investigating this group?
So I got started probably in late 2023 when I first heard about 764. That was when the FBI first released a PSA about it, but nobody really knew about it or heard anything about it at the time. The reason that I was interested is because I'd spent a couple of years prior investigating a satanic cult called the Order of Nine Angles, which is linked to some of these online groups. And in the process of researching that group, I did stumble across the 764 network. It wasn't until I saw a viral video of this guy, Kyle Spitz, getting shot in the ear by his stepdad that I realized that he was actually a member of 764. And I started to report on that and try to get people to get more attention to it. And then in the process of doing that, it took me way deeper into this network, and we started researching it. And as a result, I became a target of the group. I became a victim of harassment, threats, swatting. And so I went to the police. I filed a police report. And when I went to the police department, they asked me to come in person. And when I got there, the FBI met me at the door and said, "Are you aware of how serious this is?" And so that was in February of 2024, I guess. So that was my first run in with like, oh, this is actually a pretty big deal. Then over the course of the past year, I just continued to research, investigate, call some of these members out, try to help victims where I could, because I had been putting the information out publicly. A lot of victims felt comfortable coming to me and asking me for help. So the last year of my life has definitely been kind of a crazy roller coaster, up until this last couple of weeks where the FBI has started making this their mainstream focus, which is a really great feeling.
Yeah, it is great that they are focusing on this rather than some of the other ridiculous things that they focus on that are not a real threat.
Absolutely.
I mean, we want our children protected in this country. That should be priority number one. Okay, so let's start off with this satanic cult that you were investigating. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Order of Nine Angles started several decades ago in the UK. It's since the dawn of the internet, it's proliferated online. The MO of this satanic group is it's a cult. I mean, they do have very cult-like beliefs. Like they believe that they can increase the amount of energy in the world, and then use that to fuel satanic rituals to open up stargates. And their goal is to accelerate the collapse of human civilization. They want an apocalypse, and they believe they can do that by inciting evil acts. So you see these groups infiltrating online communities that they think are already kind of, on the path towards criminality, right? Because the closer someone is to the edge, the easier it is to nudge them off. And that's what they do. They'll infiltrate these online groups and kind of subvert them and inject these satanic aesthetics and beliefs and try to move those organizations into directions that benefit them. So that's what we saw with the 764 network.
Okay. So with this satanic cult, just so I understand, how prolific is it? I mean, I just feel, I don't think I've ever met a Satanist. I don't know if they would ever admit it, but I don't know if I've ever met one.
So I've met a ton of open Satanists before this that were just more of like the Hollywood Church of Satan types, the real kind of vanilla types of Satanists. Sounds weird to say, but these guys are very sinister and evil, and they want full collapse of human civilization. They're nihilists. And as far as how prolific they are, it's really hard to say because it's a pretty secretive group. I would say true adherents probably in the hundreds, but as far as people who've been influenced by them and are co-opting their aesthetics or like dabbling in that group's ideology, thousands for sure across the world.
So, yeah, I mean, I would think hundreds. It's not that many. I mean, we're talking like a small group of people that follow an extremely fringe ideology, right?
Agreed.
But so I've seen a lot on social media, like for example, whenever I see concerts or I guess it was the Super Bowl actually when it went viral when what's her name with the big fro hair, like the orange hair. She was with Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah, Ice,
yeah, whatever her name is. Ice Spice or something like that. Anyway, she she like made a symbol and she was wearing an upside down cross, and then people were saying, "Oh, this is Satanism. This is like a sign of Satanism." Or I see sometimes concerts and they'll show a clip from the concert and they'll say, "See, this is like they're blatantly putting satanic symbols out there. These celebrities are following Satanism," and so I see that every so often. I'm thinking, oh, come on, like that can't be real. I don't think they're really, this is just reading into things. I really
think that they do, but at the same time, I think that it's a different, not necessarily this like super evil breed of Satanism where they're trying to hurt and kill people. I think a lot of times people get really infatuated with it as an aesthetic.
Right.
So that's probably true too, but I don't know. I definitely believe that like higher up and like celebrities do weird stuff, but
they for sure do weird stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you say aesthetic, you mean like in the 90s, it was really trendy to wear crosses and people weren't religious at all, but they were wearing crosses because Madonna was wearing crosses and everybody wanted to wear crosses. So it was just like an aesthetic. Is that what you mean? Like they're adopting Satanist looking stuff just because they think it looks cool, but they don't really have they're not attributing meaning to it.
Or they might be attributing meaning to it, but that meaning might be something as simple as like, I don't like religion, or like, a middle finger to society kind of rejection of societal norms kind of meaning,
Yeah.
as opposed to like an actual dedicated practice to worshiping Satan, which I think there are far fewer of those types of people.
Yeah. Okay. So these groups then they infiltrate these other groups. They find fringe people and they're trying to kind of recruit them into their way of thinking, into their religion, basically.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us about 764.
So 764, it's actually an offshoot of a broader cyber criminal network that's known as COM. This has been around for a very, very long time. COM it's like an octopus, and all the tentacles are kind of different criminalities. So you have like hacking, people who hack, people who do Bitcoin scams. You have like an animal abuse side of it, unfortunately. And then you also have this extortion side. We call it extortion com, where people got into these chat rooms and started making a game out of who can extort people for the most, content. And then, at some point this became sextortion of minors being, we can get nudes from this kid online, pretend to be her boyfriend, get nudes, and then, extort her for increasingly more horrific content, and see kind of a contest of who can do the worst stuff. And what we saw with that was that it seems at some point, people who were adherents to Order of Nine Angles ideology infiltrated this group and spread that satanic aesthetic through it. And so now it's not, 764 isn't synonymous with Order of Nine Angles. It's just more of like, you can clearly see that it was influenced by them, if that makes sense. And it's kind of murky, the details of how that came about.
So there's just like some members of the Order of Nine Angles that are inside of also 764. And so there's just like a bit of cross there.
Yes, but I think that those members who were Order of Nine Angle members played a role in kind of making this aesthetic more widespread and also pushing for this more evil stuff. For example, killing your pets and then arranging their intestines or organs in blood into a satanic altar, right? This says, I worship Satan, 764, right? That stuff wasn't really in like, that stuff was kind of more specific to 764, which is where you see that overlapping of Satanism. But the 764 network, I should clarify, we use that to describe a really broad overlapping network, like you're saying, of different groups. And some of them don't use those aesthetics. Some of them are split off from various different factions. And some of them even have turned away from the child exploitation side and have started promoting simple terrorism and terrorist acts on video. So there's a lot of different tentacles to this octopus, but the 764 network is just an inclusive umbrella term we use to describe all of it.
Yeah. So the FBI has said that they have active cases in every single one of their offices. So that means it's fairly prevalent.
Yes, and actually, I think it was, I don't want to misspeak, but it was either The Guardian or Wired that reported that several months ago that the FBI had open cases in every field office, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. So it's interesting to see them confirm that as being factual. That's great. I'm glad to hear it, even though it gives me chills up my spine to think that there are so many of those cases out there.
Yeah, that kids are being exploited all over the place. So let's talk about how 764 evolved. And how, like, the average kid, so you're a parent watching and you're hearing about this organization. Tell us about, like, who's the target, how it happens, kind of from start to finish, how your child just starts off as a cute kid with an iPad and ends up totally exploited or even involved in 764, doing terrible things to animals and to others.
And, some of the criminal complaints that we've read about these guys who've been arrested have laid these things out. So I can give you specific examples of what's happened. For example, you get, a 12 or 13-year-old girl who's on Instagram, or maybe she's in a chat room, or even on X. We've recently stumbled on these huge communities of kids who are self-harming, cutting themselves, and kind of encouraging each other to self-harm. Well, these predators will seek out a child in those groups because, again, they're kind of close to the edge, really easy to nudge over, right? And then they'll DM them and say, hey, send me a DM. Would you be willing to do like a custom cut sign for me, is what they call it, where they cut their abuser's name into their bodies. From there, they might establish a one-on-one relationship with your kid, possibly even pretending to be much younger, your child's age, love bombing them, the classic grooming tactics to make them fall in love and trust them. They'll put them in Discord servers where they're bombarded with horrible content like child pornography, animal torture, gore, to try to desensitize them. And then once they make them do something on camera, like, for example, sexually exploit themselves, now they have a tool that they can use to blackmail those kids for more and more horrific content. So it might escalate from there to, okay, now I want you to, cut my name into your body on camera. I want you to strangle and kill your cat. I want you to go sexually abuse a sibling, all the way up to trying to get these kids to commit suicide live on camera, which has confirmed to be the case in several different cases, I guess, related to this. So it's really horrible stuff. And they film it all. And they distribute all of this in things they call lore books. So they put together on a particular victim like an entire Telegram channel or a Discord server full of this abuse content. And they'll use it to harass the kids and ask them for more stuff. They'll also get your child's personal information. Kids are notoriously not good at OPSEC, right? At keeping their personally identifiable information off the internet. And so these guys will find out who they are in real life, and they'll threaten to swat them, threaten to kill their families. And in some cases, they've gone through with these threats. In one case, a guy hired somebody to go throw a Molotov cocktail through a 14-year-old girl's window because she didn't comply. And that guy's actually both of the people involved with that have also been arrested and are pending cases at the DOJ.
So you got a kid. We see a lot of kids these days that have, they either because it's trendy or it's real, they have emotional issues, right? So some of them, it's kind of trendy to have an emotional issue. So they all kind of say, oh, I haven't, I've got some, or I don't know if I'm a boy or girl. I don't know. They kind of have these. Right. So there's the kind of trendy stuff, but then there's also those that really genuinely might feel that way. And so they find themselves kind of playing into that. Like, let's say it's just trendy, and the kid is just like, oh yeah, I get attention by saying that I'm, that I've got some sort of issue. And then they go into these online spaces where they talk about that stuff. And then these predators from this organization, which is not really this is not an organization with like leaders exactly anymore, right? Is it, or like what? They're decentralized cells where it is leaderless in the sense that anyone could take over at any point. There's no funding, there's no structure. Like I'm below somebody, right? When they did announce the arrests of the two leaders of the organization. It's a loose term. I would consider those two individuals in particular to be leaders, but kind of their capacity as leaders meant whenever one of our Telegram channels gets banned, we start a new one and coordinate it and get everybody else in there, and we keep the group going and we recruit new members and stuff. But there's not like an organizational structure to this thing. Okay. So a kid gets then kind of lured by somebody, they befriend them, they gain their trust, then they get them to send them something that would be compromising. So whether it be a nude photograph, I read one of the stories where it was like a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old girl was sending nudes to whoever it was that had befriended her. And then at that point, once they have something compromising on the kid, then they can emotionally blackmail that kid even more and say, well, I'll send this picture to everybody, or I'll show your parents, or I'll rat you out, or I'll expose you somehow. And then that's how the kid then gets deeper and deeper into doing worse and worse stuff and into being part of the group.
Yes. And, I've spoken with these kids because they've come to me. And they say it's almost the same exact script every time. I'm so terrified. I want out, but they're threatening me, and I'm so scared. I don't want to go to the police because I don't want my parents to find out. They said they'll get me in trouble. My parents are going to kill me. And so a lot of, I've had to deal with a lot of different victims, and unfortunately, some of them just do not want to go to the police, even though that's the best and only way for them to, number one, get these guys arrested so that they cannot hurt anyone else, but number two, how to protect themselves. If you're a parent and you're having this conversation with your child needs to understand that, like, no matter what they do or what situation they find themselves in, that they can trust you to listen and help them and not judge. because a lot of kids are just so scared about what my parents are going to do that prevents them from seeking out help. And so when you have this conversation with your kids at a certain age, I think it should be focused on sextortion and focused on how, these things are illegal, and you're never going to get in trouble for being the victim, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, parents need to start having those conversations with their kids, because the internet we're not going to get rid of the internet. It's here. It's here to stay. And the fact is that, the kids are, and they're way savvier on the internet than we adults are, because they grew up with it. I didn't grow up with the internet. These kids have grown up with the internet, so they know their way around the internet way better than I do.
Right. And app users also just continually make their OSs and their platforms more and more easy to use. So it's gotten progressively more simple to figure out these things. And I mean, I have a 7-year-old who can already figure out pretty much everything I can do on my phone, she can do. It's crazy to watch how fast they learn these skills. And at the same time, you don't want to developmentally stunt them by not allowing them to use technology, because we know that's going to be a really, really important thing for them in their future careers. And so there's a fine line between saying, don't ever touch a computer, and also just number one, having that kind of oversight over them, having that trust with them that they know that they can come to you for anything, and also talking to them about how they can protect themselves from predators too.
Kind of reminds me, when I was a kid and I'd walk home from school, we always got the talking of don't trust the man in the white van. Don't take candy from strangers.
He's online. He's on Discord.
Exactly.
He's on
exactly.
X. He's on Instagram.
So now it's a matter of having that conversation of look, don't send anybody anything. But if you do, then don't let them. Then teaching them about sextortion, teaching them about they can use these photographs and they'll try to get you to do worse things, and you just don't do it. You just come to me and you tell me what happened. And you're not going to get in trouble. You just tell me.
Yes, exactly. And at 7 years old, obviously, I'm not telling her about sextortion. What I am telling her is the same thing I would tell her about the white van, which is that don't talk to strangers on the internet, because they could be anybody. It could be a bad guy trying to snatch you up, right? It could be somebody, because we have seen it. In fact, there was a case a few years ago, Caleb Merritt, who is part of the 764 network. He actually took this into real life. He groomed the girl on Discord, got her to sexually exploit herself, extorted her, got herself to cut herself, and all of these things on camera. And then he traveled to her home and kidnapped her. He camped out in the woods behind her house for a couple of days, raped the girl. She was 12, and then kidnapped her. And luckily they found the girl, and now he got a 350-year sentence. So, but it just shows you that these guys groom your kids on chat rooms, and then they'll come to your house and take your kid. So it doesn't just end at online extortion either.
And even if it just stops at online extortion, I mean, that's bad enough to have your kid feeling like they're blackmailed into behavior because somebody has a nude of them. And
suicides are very, very, very common here. These kids really do feel like there's just no other out. They're so humiliated and embarrassed. They think that their whole lives are dictated by this one poor choice they made. And unfortunately, it's cost children their lives. And I heard Pam Bondi mention something about that at the press conference today, about how suicides have increased as a result of these networks.
So tell us about how you became a target, and what did you discover in your investigation? Tell us, in your investigation, did you figure out who some of these people were? Were you able to get them prosecuted? How have they then started hunting you down?
Yeah, so like I kind of mentioned before, but there was this viral video with this guy, and his name is Kyle Spitz, but he's holding the video, and his stepdad's like, "I'm going to shoot you," and he's waving the gun around, and it's just a weird, wild video. And then ultimately he's tells him, "Go ahead and shoot me," and then he fires the gun. You see the bullet leaving the barrel, and you see some drops of blood. He got grazed on the ear. Well, this video went viral for some other reason. I guess just because it was a weird video with no context.
Just to understand, the stepdad shot the kid, or the kid shot the stepdad?
The stepdad shot Kyle Spitz, who was in his 20s, but Yeah, his stepson.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this video went viral, and if you show it, your viewers will probably be like, "Oh, I remember that video," right? But nobody had the context, so they were treating Kyle Spitz like he was a victim of getting shot by a stepdad. In reality, we don't really know the context behind why the stepdad was shooting him. We could take some guesses because what I found when I was going through the comment section were there were a few people who were claiming, "Hey, I'm a victim of this guy. He's a child predator online, and he's part of 764." And since I had already been looking into that group in the course of my research, I started to dig around and I found his Twitter, like, yes, he was a member of 764. Not only that, but I was able to track out pretty much his entire network because they're linking their Telegrams accounts in the bios. And we basically found ourselves right in the middle of this whole network. So when I started to tweet about this, it kind of picked up a lot of steam. And that's when his friends started to threaten me. Kyle Spitz was arrested by U.S. Marshals just a couple of weeks later and he's actually getting sentenced in July. He's looking at life.
What did he do?
But well, the charges were online child exploitation and solicitation of child pornography. So that'll be a very interesting case. He was also charged with some animal abuse charges, but I think that they might have talked those down in the plea deal. He did plead guilty. He is still looking at 30 years to life. So that sentencing, they plan on having a bunch of victims read statements, and I'll be hopefully going to that trial in person. But so then after that is when his friends started to, harass me and threaten me, which is when I went to the police and the FBI got involved. And then a few weeks later, they arrested Cameron Finnegan, who went by the name Acid. He was one of the ones who'd been sending me all the death threats. They arrested him in the UK. He ended up being a 19-year-old. He was sentenced to 9 years a couple months ago. And since then, I've been the target of dozens of these guys, including the leaders who were those high-profile arrests a few days ago. They've been constantly trying to find out where I live so that they can harass me and harm me. I'm very lucky that they haven't found where I live yet. However, there have been multiple swatting attempts and other really, really awful stuff that we've been subjected to as a result of investigating this group.
Tell us about these leaders that were recently arrested. Is it Trippy and War? Is that what their names?
Yes, that was their usernames. Prasan Nepal, I think, was Trippy, the leader of 764. War, his name, I don't have it off the top of my head because it's like really Greek. But Trippy actually lived in North Carolina. Yes, we had been chasing this kid around for, I say kid, I mean, I'm older, but he was like 20, 21, I guess. They'd been chasing him around for a while because he was definitely that person we talked about earlier, that ringleader, the person who organized everything, that person who made propaganda, promoted, and really was invested in leading the group. And so his arrest was a huge deal because it sent a lot of the other members spiraling and panicking, and even sending me DMs telling me that either they're quitting, or they want to roll over, or they're doubling down on their attempts to kill me, whatever it may be. But they were definitely very, very bothered by that arrest, which is great because, again, you heard what they said at the press conference today. Doesn't matter how anonymous you think you are behind the keyboard, how strong you think you are manipulating and hurting these kids, they're going to find you. You're not anonymous. And so I'm really happy to hear that they're doubling down on these efforts to get these guys taken off the internet because we had talked about how there's only maybe a couple hundred members of the group. However, each of those members can have dozens of child victims over their years in this group.
Yeah. And so if they get rid of these leaders, I mean, it doesn't seem, because this is a loose organization that's not really organized, right. How do they get rid of it?
They don't. This is something that's going to require the FBI to continuously monitor and treat it like a threat. They're going to have to get more resources involved. And I mean, I think they should spend the majority of their resources protecting kids. That's my personal opinion, right?
Yeah.
But this is definitely, there's a power vacuum. So certainly there's room for someone else to step up into the leadership role. Also, they could just drop the 764 label and start making spinoff groups. This is a viral contagion model. So any kid, and And I guess we should mention too that we've talked a lot about your kid becoming the victim of sexual exploitation, but your kid could also become an abuser in one of these networks. A lot of the abusers we're finding are very young as 14 years old. We found abusing kids in these rooms. So there is there's definitely a lot of adults, and we've seen over a dozen arrests of grown adults in these networks as well. But there's even more that are younger and being groomed into abusing other kids by these older people. And so, unfortunately, I've spoken to parents who's got a knock on the door and the FBI told them that their 15-year-old son was abusing kids in a chat room. And it was just the same nightmare for those parents. And so you got to watch what your kids are doing online. Talk to them about these groups, because these kids are really ruining their whole lives and throwing them away.
I'm sure a lot of parents right now are watching and thinking, not my kid. My kid would never do this. Is there a profile of kids that end up as victims and those who end up as abusers?
The only thing that these kids have in common is that they have unsupervised access to the internet. They come from all households. I've seen kids from neglective, abusive households, and unfortunately, they are the worst off, right? Because even after we help these kids and catch their predators, they often fall back into that network. But there's also plenty of victims whose parents were perfectly involved. They have healthy brothers and sisters, live in suburban neighborhoods, and had no idea that their kid was falling into this, because these predators are also very good at teaching the kids how to avoid getting caught. They'll give them guides on how to avoid, your parents finding out. And so it's very sinister, very insidious, and anyone's kid could become a victim. The only thing these kids have in common is that they all had unsupervised access online.
Yeah, I think that's I think parents need to start thinking about, I know every kid has a phone these days and an iPad, and of course then there's computers, but, when I was a kid, we didn't really have computers back then in the 80s. There wasn't really, and in the 90s, when I graduated high school, we just got internet. I think when I was maybe 13, 14 is when internet first came out.
Dial up.
And there was and no one had internet. I just happened to live in a house with an early adopter, so we were like the only one with internet. And even then, internet didn't really become a thing until I was in my 20s. That's when people started really having, internet access and online and all of that. But the kids that did, those of us that had internet, computers also weren't a thing where everybody had one. It was a family computer, and it was usually out in the living room or in the kitchen or something. So everybody could see what everybody was doing, and the kids had to take turns getting on the computer because they had to write up their essay or something, and that's how it was. So it was a family computer in the middle of the house for everybody to see. But these days, kids are able to take their phones, their iPads, they might have their own little laptop, and they're going off into their bedrooms and they're doing their homework, which seems normal, right? Because when I was a kid growing up, it's like, you go in your room and you open up your math book or your science book and you do your homework. But now that's all online. They don't have these textbooks; they have it all on they have these iPads. So it's tough to figure out how do you get your kids to not go off in their room and use the internet, and they really shouldn't.
And also it's like, I understand the argument that like, well, I want my kid to have a phone because I want to keep in touch with them, right? But once you give your kid a phone with full internet access, you're giving them a supercomputer that can do anything. They have access to anyone in the world, right? And so really like tightening down on those parental restrictions, maybe just a phone that doesn't have internet access, right? Blocking internet. You can do all of these things, and you should be doing all of these things at age appropriate levels, obviously. I think once a kid gets a little bit older, 16, 17, it's time for them to learn responsible internet use, because you also don't want to take it too far to where once they leave home, they're like, making terrible mistakes online. I think that it's important to teach them responsible internet use as the older teen levels. And again, just making sure that you still have supervision over all of that, and that you have that level of trust and communication with your kid, that they know that they can always come to you if something seems off. Hopefully my kid will, when she finally gets online, she'll be able to identify these guys and bring them to mommy, and we'll deal with them. Right. But the big takeaway here is like, your kid shouldn't have unsupervised access to the internet.
Especially not at certain ages, I think. Like you said, once they get to like 16, 17, I feel like then you need to. They need to be able to be on the internet on their own because they're soon going to be on their own without your supervision outside of your house. So you have to, taking the training wheels off at some point. But by then, especially when they're 16, 17, you absolutely can have the sexting conversation with them.
Yes,
you can have the sextortion conversation. You can have all of those conversations with them to where they understand that there are these predators that will try to befriend you and make you think they love you, and you'll think, oh no, they really do. They care about me, and you've never met them. And then they, by love bombing, and then they get you to do these things, and then they blackmail you by saying they're going to show your nudes to everybody and send them to everybody in your school, and you become frightened, and then you start doing other things for them. And that's actually the story of how a lot of kids that get trapped into sex slavery. That's the story. That's exactly what happens to them. It's the same tactic.
They run away with these people.
Yeah.
Because they think that they love them, and they convince them their parents don't love them, right? We've seen cases of, we saw a case of a girl years ago who was just chatting with a member of a Discord group. She was 14 and he was in his mid-20s, and he convinced her to run away, and he kidnapped her. And then they found her like later in North Dakota. This is actually kind of a big story back when it happened, but they found her, but it was years later. She was already 18. And this guy had just basically kidnapped her and groomed her, and she had been a slave to him for all of these years, and she didn't even realize it, right?
Yeah.
Because she'd been so groomed and abused into believing that she loved this person. So yes, these guys are monsters, but they'll make themselves look like, good guys to your kid.
Is there a particular age where they get sucked into being a victim or an abuser more so than other ages?
I would say the youngest we've seen is probably 9, but that's on the lower end. I would say that the vast majority of them are probably ages 12 to 16. That's probably just the age that most kids start gaming online, because I don't think we've mentioned, but these guys, one of their biggest stomping grounds is the game Roblox. This is a kid's game where you can interface with the public. The public some stranger can just walk up to you and start chatting with your child. It's no different than having your child alone in the middle of a busy city talking to strangers. If you're letting your kids on Roblox, you're making a mistake. That one I will put my foot down and say, just don't let them have that game.
Okay.
But other games like this too, where they'll find your kid on these games. And so any age that your kid is online talking to the public in any capacity is when they become a victim.
Yeah. Well, 12 to 16 is also a really vulnerable age. They're hitting puberty. So suddenly they have hormones and feelings that they haven't had before. And they also want independence, and everybody at 12, 13, 14 starts hating their parents and doesn't want anything to do with their parents anymore, right? They want to shut themselves into their rooms and be on, when I was a kid, it was on the phone with friends. And now it's the internet with friends, being online with these games with friends. And that's way more dangerous, because at least with the phone, no one could just jump in on our phone calls and suddenly be like, hey girls, tell me about yourselves. Like, that didn't happen. But with the internet, it can happen. With gaming, that does happen. And that is very... Yeah, so I think that age, that makes sense. It makes sense that that's the age to really watch the kids and to not let them have just unfettered access to the internet. And gosh. Well, so now, it looks like the FBI is finally taking this seriously. They're actually cracking down on it. They're actually making this a priority. That's all really great. Are you going to still continue to investigate and help the FBI in any way?
If they ask for my help, I was also a victim of swatting. And so, I did actually go and recently make another complaint to the FBI. They asked me to come in because they're also taking these swattings very seriously.
Tell people what swatting is, just so that they understand, and why it's dangerous.
It's a type of harassment where someone finds your personal information online, and they will call in like a fake bomb threat, or they'll call in your local police department and tell them that you have a gun, you're about to murder your whole family, or any number of things. And their goal is to get the police or the SWAT team to show up and arrest you or apprehend you and cause a bunch of problems for you. Yeah. So it's weaponizing the police force in your area against you, basically. It's a serious problem because it's dangerous. As we know, anything can happen when the police roll up to your house with guns drawn. It's also a drain of resources. It's taking the police response away from other places that need it. So yeah, it's a very serious thing that the FBI has recently doubled down on their efforts to crack down on these people who are doing it and prosecute them to the fullest extent, which is great.
Yeah. Well, and it's so dangerous because somebody could come out and, they could get shot, right? You could end up getting shot by the SWAT team when you're coming out saying, wait. And they're like, whoa, they got a gun or something,
Exactly.
and next thing you know, you're dead. So very dangerous. Well, Becca, thank you so much for being here and educating us on this. I think more people need to be educated on the dangers of what's actually happening out there on the internet with the kids, how they're able to get the kids. It's good for you for bringing so much attention to this that now the FBI is finally doing something about it. This is what many of us have been wanting to see, is the FBI actually be doing the job that we expect them to do, rather than going after like pro-life Catholics or J6ers or whatever,
For over a year, I've been like frantically tweeting, like tagging the FBI, like do something, put out PSAs. And so, yes, we definitely feel vindicated and like they're listening to us, even if maybe they weren't listening to me, but maybe they were listening to the parents of America when we said that this is what we want our FBI to do. Yeah.
Well, we do have your Twitter or X account down below, so people can follow you there. Is there anywhere else that people should go? I mean, besides, are there any other resources where parents can go to learn more so that they can protect their kids?
I would say my own Substack, bxrights.substack.com is basically just articles and research that I've put out on this topic.
Okay.
Probably the most extensive information you'll get on this particular network. Other than that, I would say that I'm sitting here waiting for the FBI to put out more PSAs, because I think that they mentioned they're going to put out a lot more stuff. But
good.
Definitely follow my Substack if you want to learn more about this network. It also will include like signs and things that you can look out for, red flags you can look out for in your own home, and things like that, so that you can help keep your kids safe.
Great. Well, we do have that link to your Substack also down below. Becca, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can check out Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. The show airs live. It is a 1-hour live show Monday through Friday. Just head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.